Ever wondered about real heroes? We're diving into the incredible story of someone whose courage in a crisis earned them the highest military honor. Seriously, one selfless act totally changed everything and secured their place in history, right? The Medal of Honor is most often associated with acts of extraordinary bravery on the battlefield. It recognizes soldiers who risk their lives to save others or accomplish critical missions under extreme danger. However, some stories connected to the Medal of Honor are not about dramatic moments of combat, but about sacrifice, remembrance, and national respect. One of the most meaningful and emotional stories in American military history is that of First Lieutenant MichaelJBlassie, a U.S. Air Force pilot who died during the Vietnam War. For more than 2 decades after his death, his remains were buried as the unknown soldier of the Vietnam War at Arlington National. Blassie's story is unique. He did not receive the Medal of Honor for a single heroic act in battle. Instead, he became a symbol of all missing and unidentified American service members. His journey from young pilot to fallen warrior to unknown hero, and finally to identified son, reflects the nation's commitment to honoring those who serve. MichaelJBlassie was born on April 4, 1948 in St. Louis, Missouri. He grew up in a close-knit, patriotic, and hard-working family. His parents, Maurice and Jean Blassie, instilled strong values of discipline, faith, and service in their children. From an early age, Michael showed intelligence, curiosity, and determination. Blassie attended Catholic schools and later enrolled at St. Louis University High School, where he excelled academically. Teachers and classmates remembered him as polite, focused, and respectful. After high school, he attended St. Louis University, where he joined the Air Force ROTC program. His participation in ROTC reflected his growing desire to serve his country as an officer and pilot. Through ROTC, Blassie earned a commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force. He entered flight training and began the rigorous process of becoming a military pilot. Flight training was demanding both physically and mentally. Cadets were required to master complex aircraft systems, navigation, aerial combat procedures, and emergency situations. Blassie performed well in training and showed strong discipline and leadership. He was described by instructors as calm under pressure and highly motivated. After completing training, he qualified as an A-37 Dragonfly attack aircraft pilot. The A-37 was a light attack jet used for close air support missions in Vietnam. It was designed to fly low and slow, making it highly effective but also extremely vulnerable to enemy fire. By 1971, Blassie was deployed to Southeast Asia and assigned to Bien Ho Air Base in South Vietnam. By the early 1970s, the Vietnam War had entered a difficult and controversial phase. American forces were gradually withdrawing, while South Vietnamese forces were taking on more responsibility. Despite troop reductions, air operations remained intense. U.S. pilots flew thousands of missions supporting ground troops. These missions were extremely dangerous. Pilots faced anti-aircraft guns, surface-to-air missiles, and small arms fire. Many aircraft were shot down over enemy-controlled territory. Recovery of downed air crews was often impossible due to hostile conditions. It was in this environment that MichaelJBlassie flew combat missions. In 1972, First Lieutenant MichaelJBlassie was flying an A-37 on a combat mission over An Lộc, South Vietnam. The region was under heavy attack by North Vietnamese forces as part of the Easter Offensive. Blassie's mission was to provide close air support to South Vietnamese troops who were under intense enemy pressure. During the mission, his aircraft was struck by anti-aircraft fire. Witnesses reported seeing his plane explode in midair and crash into enemy-held territory near the Cambodian border. Blassie was killed instantly. Because the crash occurred in hostile territory, no immediate recovery was possible. He was listed as killed in action, body not recovered. His family was informed of his death, but they had no remains to bury and no grave to visit. In the years following the war, the U.S. government worked to recover remains of missing service members. In 1984, remains believed to belong to an American pilot were recovered from the crash site near An Lộc. The remains, despite advanced forensic efforts, officials at the time were unable to make a positive identification. As a result, the remains were designated as those of an unknown soldier from the Vietnam War. On May 28, 1984, the unknown soldier of Vietnam was buried at Arlington National Cemetery in the Tomb of the Unknowns. President Ronald Reagan presided over the ceremony and awarded the Medal of Honor to the unknown soldier. The tomb represented all Americans who had died in Vietnam without identification. For many families of missing soldiers, it symbolized national respect and remembrance. The Blassie family attended the ceremony and respected the honor given to the unknown soldier. However, they began to question whether the remains might belong to Michael. New evidence suggested that the crash site where the remains were found matched Michael's final mission location. In addition, Michael was the only pilot known to have been lost, and the family quietly raised concerns but initially received little response. For years, they respected the government's decision, believing that disturbing the tomb would dishonor all unknown soldiers. However, advances in DNA technology in the 1990s changed everything. By the late 1990s, DNA analysis had become highly accurate. Scientists could now identify remains using small biological samples. The Department of Defense began reviewing unidentified remains from past wars. In 1998, after years of advocacy by the Blassie family, officials agreed to exhume the remains of the unknown soldier of Vietnam for testing. This was a historic and emotional decision. The Tomb of the Unknowns had never been opened before for identification purposes. In May 1998, the remains were carefully removed and transported to a military laboratory. DNA samples were compared with blood samples provided by the Blassie family. The results were clear. The remains belonged to MichaelJBlassie. After more than 26 years, he was finally identified. The announcement brought both relief and sorrow to the family. They had closure but also renewed grief. The remains were returned to the Blassie family and buried in St. Louis with full military honors. After Blassie's identification, the Tomb of the Unknowns no longer contained remains from the Vietnam War. It now bears the inscription, "Honoring and keeping faith with America's missing servicemen." This change reflected the nation's evolving commitment to identifying and honoring every fallen soldier. Blassie represents thousands of service members who died far from home and were never immediately identified. His story reminds Americans that behind every uniform is a family waiting for answers. Seriously, that hero was truly amazing, right?
If you like the story, please do like my channel and subscribe. Till then, see you next time.